Okay, we are moving on this evening. We saw last week the Israelites were at a place called Rephidim, and there was a problem again over the supply of water for the people. There was the conflict with the Amalekites, which the Israelites won under the leadership of Joshua. And then we had the visit of Jethro to Moses, Moses' father-in-law, and Jethro bringing Moses' wife and his two sons. And Jethro's advice to Moses on how he ought to organize things and to delegate some responsibilities. So this evening we come into the section of the book of Exodus, which goes from chapters 19 and 20, in which we have the record of the giving of the Ten Commandments. And chapter 19 deals really with the preparation for that event, for the giving of those Ten Commandments. So we'll be looking at chapter 19 this evening. This is the map that we've been using, and we can see the red route there that the Israelites have been following. Rephidim was where we were last week, and then just a bit further south from there is the location of Mount Sinai in that orange circle there on the map. So we're going to begin here in chapter 19, and we'll read the first 6 verses of chapter 19. On the third new moon after the people of Israel had gone forth out of the land of Egypt, on that day they came into the wilderness of Sinai. And when they set out from Rephidim and came into the wilderness of Sinai, they encamped in the wilderness, and there Israel encamped before the mountain. And Moses went up to God, and the Lord called him out of the mountain, saying, Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the people of Israel, You have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings, and brought you to myself. Now therefore, if you will obey my voice, and keep my covenant, you shall be my own possession among all peoples, for all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which you shall speak to the children of Israel. So the people leave Rephidim now, and they travel on further south, and they arrive in the wilderness of Sinai. We're told on the third new moon after they had come out of Egypt. The New International Version translates that as in the third month. The third month in the Hebrew calendar, the name of the third month is Sivan, and this in our calendar would be late May or early June. So 3 months have passed since they left Egypt, and Moses has now returned to a region which was very familiar to him since he had worked in this region as a shepherd during the 40 years he spent in Midian. The exodus from Egypt was the first phase, really, in the creation of Israel as a nation. And now at Sinai, the second phase would take place when God gives the Israelites the law to guide them in their daily lives, and will give them instructions concerning the building of the tabernacle, which would be used for worship. So this is really the defining moment in Israel's relationship with God, what will happen here at Mount Sinai. So the journey goes on then from Rephidim to Sinai, and the people then come to encamp before the mountain. We're told that they went into the wilderness of Sinai. When we hear the word wilderness, we often perhaps think of a barren or a desert region of some kind, but the word simply means an uninhabited area, and would be a region where there would be vegetation and a region for grazing of animals. The exact location and the identity of Mount Sinai, though, is uncertain. Different theories are put forward as to where exactly it might be, and there are several mountains in the region, the southern part of the Sinai Peninsula, which could fit with the descriptions that are given. The traditional location, the name of the mountain which traditionally it's said to be Mount Sinai, is called Gebel Musa. And at the foot of that mountain, there's a monastery that has been built called St. Catherine's Monastery, which has been there for many hundreds of years. And it was there that the Sinaiticus manuscript was discovered, one of the important biblical manuscripts. So this is the traditional generally regarded as the traditional location for Mount Sinai, but to say we can't be absolutely certain of exactly where it was. But wherever it was in that region, it would have been an impressive setting for these events that are about to take place. And Israel would stay in this region by Mount Sinai for almost 1 year. We learn from Numbers chapter 10, verses 11 and 12, how long they were there at Mount Sinai. Numbers chapter 10, verse 11 tells us here, in the second year, in the second month, on the 20th day of the month, the cloud was taken up from over the tabernacle of the testimony, and the people of Israel set out by stages from the wilderness of Sinai, and the cloud settled down in the wilderness of Paran. So this is when they leave Mount Sinai here, and it's in the second year after they have come out of Egypt, in the second month. So they've arrived in the third month of the first year. So it's about 11 months that they will be there at Mount Sinai. The arrival of the Israelites at Mount Sinai is occurs in fulfillment of the promise that God gave to Moses when he first spoke to him at the burning bush in this same region in Exodus chapter 3 and verse 12, when Moses had been objecting to God's instruction for him to go back to Egypt, and he didn't want to go. But God says to him in verse 12 of chapter 3, "But I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you that I have sent you. When you have brought forth the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God upon this mountain." So that was the promise that God gave to Moses there, that he would bring the people back to this mountain, Mount Sinai or Mount Horeb, and so that we see the fulfillment of that now when they arrive here. In verses 3 to 6, we have what is the basic pattern or template of a covenant or a treaty. In the ancient East, covenants or treaties followed the same basic pattern. And there were two types of treaties or covenants. There was one that was made between two equal partners, in which the two parties bound themselves to equal obligations. So two nations maybe enter into a treaty in which they are both equal partners. And then there was also what was known as the suzerainty covenant, in which a stronger, more powerful party imposed certain obligations and conditions upon a weaker party. And that might happen if one nation had conquered another nation, that the victorious nation would impose this covenant upon the defeated nation. And the elements included in these covenants included a preamble, a historical background, some general principles for future conduct, and some specific stipulations of how people were to behave, and then the calling upon a witnesses or a divine witness, and then some curses and blessings, setting out the consequences of obedience or disobedience of the covenant. And this is the basic pattern which is followed here in verses 3 to 6. So we have in verse 3 the preamble, which introduces God, the Lord, as the source of the legislation. So verse 3, we're told that Moses went up to God and God spoke to him from the mountain. And then in verse 4, we have the historical background to the covenant. That is what God has done for Israel in bringing them out of Egypt. He says here, "I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself." And that's really describing God's loving care of his people, likening himself to the way in which an eagle cares for its young. The mother eagle will take care of its young by flying beneath them to catch them on its wings if they fall. That picture is also used in Deuteronomy chapter 32 and verses 10 and 11. Deuteronomy chapter 32, which is another poetic section here, is a song of Moses. It says, he found him in a desert land and in the howling waste of the wilderness. He encircled him, he cared for him, he kept him as the apple of his eye. Like an eagle that stirs up its nest, that flutters over its young, spreading out its wings, catching them, bearing them on its pinions. A picture there of the eagle catching the young ones on its wings in order to protect them and keep them from falling. And this is how God is picturing himself here, of what he has done for Israel, that he's carried them on eagle's wings, and he says he's brought them to himself. So God's care for the people would be a motivation for them to accept the terms of this covenant. We have then in verse 5, the beginning of verse 5, the general principle for future conduct. God says, obey my voice. Since God has shown this care for his people and brought them to himself, then they ought to obey him. Obey my voice, he says. And then in verse 5, the second part of verse 5, are the specific stipulations. He says, keep my covenant. And the details of that covenant will be revealed later in chapter 20 and the following chapters there. But in general, keep my covenant, he says. And then the blessings to come if they do keep the covenant, if they obey. He says, you shall be my own possession among all peoples. You shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. So God's telling them what they will be if they obey this covenant. So this is the special relationship that God is establishing with Israel. First of all, there he says they will be my own possession. Now, that phrase means my special treasure. The New Revised Standard Version translates it as a treasured possession. And it's a word that's used in First Chronicles chapter 29 and verse 3 of a gift that David gave for the temple when Solomon would build the temple. Before David died, he made provision, and from his own personal wealth, from his own personal possession, he made a gift. In First Chronicles 29, verse 3, he says, moreover, in addition to all that I have provided for the holy house, I have a treasure of my own, of gold and silver, and because of my devotion to the house of my God, I give it to the house of my God. So he says, I have a treasure of my own. So his personal possession that he's going to give. And that's the same word that's used here where God speaks of Israel as my own possession, my own special possession. First Chronicles 29 and verse 3 was that. And then also the word is used again of a gift in Ecclesiastes chapter 2 and verse 8. Again, speaking of a gift from a king, I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. So he said, I gathered for myself silver and gold. This was my personal possession, is what he's saying there. So Israel would be God's own personal possession, their treasured possession. So that would indicate the value that God placed upon his people, that they were his treasured possession. And then God has indicating that God has chosen Israel above all other nations of the earth. That out of all of the nations, he has chosen Israel. Deuteronomy chapter 26, verses 18 and 19 gives us that description as well of them being chosen. above other nations, Deuteronomy 26, verse 18. And the Lord has declared this day concerning you that you are a people for his own possession, as he has promised you, and that you are to keep all his commandments, that he will set you high above all nations that he has made, in praise and in fame and in honor, and that you shall be a people holy to the Lord your God, as he has spoken. So those verses saying much the same thing as we have here in Exodus chapter 19, that Israel would be set high above all the other nations that God has made. They're also to be a kingdom of priests, God says. So as a nation, Israel was to have uh, a priestly status. That may indicate that they were to act as God's representatives to other nations, that they were to be a light to the other nations, that the other nations should see God in them. So the relationship that they have with God would determine how they are to behave, how they ought to behave. And so God also says that they are to be a holy nation. Or a nation that is set apart from others. When we come into the New Testament, we find that this type of language is used of the church in 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 9 and 10. The same sort of language that is used there of Israel is now being used of the church. 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 9 and 10. And Peter says to his readers, "But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's own people, that you may declare the wonderful deeds of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Once you were no people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy." So the words there from Exodus 19, Peter using those words and applying them to the church and the special relationship that the church now has to God. So Moses is commanded then to speak these words to the children of Israel. And after Moses had presented these words, the people expressed their agreement to obey them. So verse 7, we'll read on here. So Moses came and called the elders of the people and set before them all these words which the Lord had commanded him. And all the people answered together and said, "All that the Lord has spoken, we will do." And Moses reported the words of the people to the Lord, and the Lord said to Moses, "Lo, I am coming to you in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with you, and may also believe you forever." So the people then express their agreement to obey these words. "All that the Lord has spoken, we will do," they say. So the people ratify the covenant, agreeing to abide by its terms and conditions, although the details have not yet been provided, they're yet to be revealed. And then Moses reported the people's agreement to the Lord. God then tells Moses of his intention to come in a thick cloud that the people may hear when I speak with you, and may also believe you forever. So the coming of God in the cloud on this occasion would be so that the people would believe that God was speaking to Moses, and the people would believe in Moses as well as in God. So this would give credibility to Moses. It would confirm to the people that Moses has this relationship with God. The coming of God in the cloud in this way, the manifesting himself in this form, is often referred to as a theophany. God making himself visible or making himself known in some visible form to the people. God being spirit is invisible, but at times he does make himself known in these various ways. So God will speak from the cloud. But before the people could approach God, they had to prepare themselves. So we'll read on here from verse 10. Then Moses told the words of the people to the Lord, and the Lord said to Moses, "Go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their garments and be ready by the third day. For on the third day the Lord will come down upon Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. And you shall set bounds for the people round about, saying, Take heed that you do not go up into the mountain or touch the border of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall be put to death. No hand shall touch him, but he shall be stoned or shot. Whether beast or man, he shall not live. When the trumpet sounds a long blast, they shall come up to the mountain." So Moses went down from the mountain to the people and consecrated the people, and they washed their garments. And he said to the people, "Be ready by the third day. Do not go near a woman." So the people have to prepare themselves in readiness for God making this appearance upon the mountain. They are to be consecrated today and tomorrow, and they are to wash their garments. The washing of the garments is mentioned in Numbers chapter 8 and verse 21 in connection with the Levites purifying themselves when they're chosen for their service. And the Levites purified themselves from sin and washed their clothes, and Aaron offered them as a wave offering before the Lord, and Aaron made atonement for them to cleanse them. So it's like if you're going somewhere special, if you're going to meet some special person, that you might put on some new clothes, where you wouldn't wear your everyday dirty clothes, but you would change your garments. We see this also in Genesis chapter 35 and verse 2, when Jacob returns after he's been away with his uncle, and he comes back to Bethel, and he's about to build an altar to God there. So Genesis chapter 35, verse 2 says, "So Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, Put away the foreign gods that are among you, and purify yourselves, and change your garments. Then let us arise and go up to Bethel, that I may make there an altar to the God who answered me in the day of my distress and has been with me wherever I have gone." So in preparation for him making that altar to God and going to Bethel there, uh, his household are to purify themselves, and that involved changing their garments. So a sort of symbolic way of indicating their purification. Also in Genesis chapter 41 and verse 14, we have Joseph when he's called out of prison by Pharaoh. He changes his clothes, his garments, when he comes out of the prison. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. And when he had shaved himself and changed his clothes, he came in before Pharaoh. The idea of you're about to go into the presence of someone important, so clean yourself up, have a shave, put some new clothes on. And that's the idea of the preparation of the people here for this appearance of God on the mountain, that they were to consecrate themselves and change their garments. So by the third day, then, they are ready for the Lord to come down upon Mount Sinai in their sight. Verse 11 there says, "And be ready by the third day, for on the third day the Lord will come down upon Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people." We often think of God's dwelling place being in heaven, and we think of that as being up. And so if God is going to show himself to people on earth, he has to come down from heaven. We're not to understand this in a literal geographical sense that God is living somewhere high above us. But that's the way in which we can relate to this, the idea of God coming down and coming, showing himself here on earth amongst mankind. Moses is to set a boundary around the mountain so that the people do not go too close to the mountain. It's like a sort of exclusion zone or a safety barrier around the mountain to prevent the people from getting too close. The presence of God would make the mountain holy. And so whoever then touches the mountain is to be put to death. And the death, the manner of death, we're told in verse 13, would be by stoning or being shot with an arrow. So the executioner could not touch the victim, because if they touched the victim, then they would then become unclean themselves. So it had to be done by a method which not involve them coming into contact, physical contact with the guilty party. The signal for the people to approach the mountain would be a long blast on the trumpet. So Moses has been given these instructions by God on the mountain, and now he goes down from the mountain to carry this out, to consecrate the people. So we're told in verse 14 there that Moses went down from the mountain to the people and consecrated the people, and they washed their garments. So there's the washing, cleansing of the garments and ready for this. And then also as part of this consecration process, sexual relations were prohibited as well. That would involve ceremonial defilement if people engaged in that. So we see in Leviticus chapter 15 and verse 18, which is a long section here dealing with ceremonial defilement, which occurs through the discharge of bodily fluids. And Leviticus chapter 15 and verse 18 here says this: if a man lies with a woman and has an emission of semen, both of them shall bathe themselves in water and be unclean until the evening. So sexual relationship involved ceremonial, ritual uncleanness. And then verse 31 towards the end of the chapter there, summarizes that in Leviticus 15. Thus you shall keep the people of Israel separate from their uncleanness, lest they die in their uncleanness by defiling my tabernacle that is in their midst. So it would defile the tabernacle if they did any of the things mentioned there in chapter 15. This is the law for him who has a discharge, and for him who has an emission of semen, becoming unclean thereby. Also for her who is sick with her impurity, that is for anyone, male or female, who has a discharge, and for the man who lies with a woman who is unclean. So these are this is the instructions that are given to the people for their consecration, so that they would be ready for the Lord to make this appearance on the mountain. So verse 16 to 25, then we see the Lord now making his appearance on Mount Sinai. On the morning of the third day, there were thunders and lightnings and a thick cloud upon the mountain, and a very loud trumpet blast, so that all the people who were in the camp trembled. Then Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet God, and they took their stand at the foot of the mountain. And Mount Sinai was wrapped in smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in fire, and the smoke of it went up like the smoke of a kiln, and the whole mountain quaked greatly. And as the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder, Moses spoke, and God answered him in thunder. And the Lord came down upon Mount Sinai to the top of the mountain, and the Lord called Moses to the top of the mountain, and Moses went up. And the Lord said to Moses, Go down and warn the people, lest they break through to the Lord to gaze, and many of them perish. And also let the priests who come near to the Lord consecrate themselves, lest the Lord break out upon them. And Moses said to the Lord, The people cannot come up to Mount Sinai, for thou thyself didst charge us, saying, Set bounds about the mountain and consecrate it. And the Lord said to him, Go down and come up, bringing Aaron with you, but do not let the priests and the people break through to come up to the Lord, lest he break out against them. So Moses went down to the people and told them. So on the morning of the third day, uh, the the thunder, lightning, and thick cloud descended upon the mountain, and the signs were accompanied by this very loud trumpet blast, which caused the people to tremble. Later in chapter 20 and verse 18, we're told of the reaction of the people here. Now, when all the people perceived the thunderings and the lightnings and the sound of the trumpet and the mountain smoking, the people were afraid and trembled, and they stood afar off and said to Moses, You speak to us, and we will hear, but let not God speak to us, lest we die. Moses now brought the people from the camp to the foot of the mountain in order to meet God there. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verses 9 to 12 recalls this event as well. Deuteronomy chapter 4 and verse 9. Only take heed and keep your soul diligently, lest you forget the things which your eyes have seen, unless they depart from your heart all the days of your life. Make them known to your children and your children's children, how on the day that you stood before the Lord your God at Horeb, the Lord said to me, Gather the people to me that I may let them hear my words, so that they may learn to fear me all the days that they live upon the earth, and that they may teach their children so. And you came near and stood at the foot of the mountain, while the mountain burned with fire to the heart of heaven, wrapped in darkness, cloud and gloom. Then the Lord spoke to you out of the midst of the fire. You heard the sound of the words, but saw no form. There was only a voice. Well, Moses there is reminding the people of what has happened here. Verse 18 of Exodus 19 then describes the scene at the mountain. Mount Sinai was wrapped in smoke because the Lord had descended upon it in fire, and the smoke went up like the smoke of a kiln. In Genesis chapter 19, verse 28, a similar description is given of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, that the fire went up like fire from a kiln or a furnace. And here the whole mountain quaked greatly. And then there's the sound of the trumpet, growing louder and louder. And Moses spoke, and God answered in the thunder. So this is an impressive sight here. It's a sort of sensory overload with the things that the people see and the things that hear that are going on here. The Lord is described here as coming down upon the top of Mount Sinai and calling Moses to come up to the top of the mountain. And there seems to be a lot of Moses going up and down the mountain here. He's then told to go down and warn the people not to come any closer, lest they break through to the Lord to gaze and many of them perish. So curiosity might have got the better of them, and they wanted to get closer to see what was going on. But there was danger if they were to do that, if they were to get too close, that the Lord would break through on them, and that many would perish. Verse 22 mentions the priests also, who are to consecrate themselves, lest the Lord break out upon them. The verse here indicates that Israel seemed to have priests, or those who served as priests, before the appointment of the Levitical priesthood. Later, it's the tribe of Levi who are chosen to form the priesthood. But here, before that happens, there still seems to be some who had a priestly function of some kind. In chapter 24 and verse 5, we're told of some young men of Israel who offered burnt offerings and sacrifices. Uh, he sent young men of the people of Israel who offered burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offerings of oxen to the Lord. This is before the Levites are chosen, so there seemed to be some sort of priesthood in operation before that time. And Moses says to the Lord that the people cannot come up to Mount Sinai because God himself has told them not to set bounds about the mountain and to consecrate it. Moses is told to go down and to come back up to the mountain, this time bringing with him his brother Aaron. And the people and the priests, again, it's emphasized that they are not to come through lest the Lord break out against them, meaning that the Lord would destroy them. So verse 25 says, so Moses went down to the people and told them. So this sort of sets the scene here for what is about to happen in chapter 20, and when God speaks and God gives what we call the Ten Commandments in the first part of chapter 20 there. So all of this is preparation for that, for this revelation from God of the details of the law, the covenant that the people have committed themselves to. There are really several reasons for this dramatic event, this visual presentation at Mount Sinai. Why did all this happen? What effect did this have upon the people? And what did it tell the people about the Lord, about God? Well, firstly, perhaps it would impress upon the people the power of God, the majestic power of the Lord, that seeing the mountain with the smoke and the lightning and the mountain quaking, all of that would be a demonstration of the Lord's power. It would also emphasize to the people the tremendous importance of this occasion, that this is something really significant is happening here whilst all this is going on. It would also remind the people of the seriousness of their commitment to obedience. They've said they would obey the word of the Lord. And this again would emphasize the character of the Lord to whom they are committing themselves. It would also show the establishment of this relationship between God and his people, that God has promised to make them a holy nation, a kingdom of priests, his own special possession. And this is emphasizing the importance of that relationship. And it would also emphasize the holiness of God's character, that the people are to consecrate themselves, and there's this boundary around the mountain that they're not allowed to go close to the mountain, that indicating God is separate from them. God is a holy God, and they are to respect that. There is a New Testament reference to this occasion. The writer to the Hebrews makes reference to this event in Hebrews chapter 12, verses 18 to 24. And he's drawing a contrast here between the events at Mount Sinai and what we as a church have come to. He says, for you have not come to what may be touched, a blazing fire and darkness and gloom and a tempest, and the sound of a trumpet, and a voice whose words made the hearers entreat that no further messages be spoken to them. For they could not endure the order that was given. If even a beast touches the mountain, it shall be stoned. Indeed, so terrifying was the sight that Moses said, I tremble with fear. But you have come to Mount Zion, and to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to innumerable angels in festal gathering, and to the assembly of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven, and to a judge who is God of all, and to the spirits of just men made perfect, and to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks more graciously than the blood of Abel. See that you do not refuse him who is speaking. For if they did not escape when they refused him who warned them on earth, much less shall we escape if we reject him who warns from heaven. So the writer here is showing that we have come to something better. We haven't come to Mount Sinai with all of uh, this blazing mountain and the darkness and the sound of the trumpet. But we have come, he says, to Mount Zion, heavenly Jerusalem, the spiritual Jerusalem, the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. And it's a better situation that we have come to than what Israel went to, that we have Jesus as the mediator of a new covenant, that Moses was the mediator of the old covenant. He was the go-between between God and the people. But in contrast, Jesus is the mediator of this new covenant. So the writer pointing out there for us how much better things are under Jesus Christ than through the law and through Moses. So we'll stop here for this evening, and the next time we meet,